Alrighty guys, welcome to the first Axiom Aviation instrument video. Today we're going to talk about IFR minimum altitudes. First altitude we're going to talk about today is the MEA, most common altitude that you're going to run across in your instrument flying. It stands for minimum en route altitude. Let's go ahead and draw up our two VORs here, and then I'll explain how an MEA works. Alright, we've got our two VORs drawn up. Let's go ahead and draw the course between the VORs, the route segment. Okay, so an MEA gives us two different things. The first thing it gives us is obstacle clearance along the entire route segment. So you're going to be sure you're not going to hit anything. Now, how much obstacle clearance do you get? It depends on if you're in non-mountainous or mountainous areas. If you're in non-mountainous areas of the country, it's 1,000 feet of obstacle clearance. And if you're in mountainous areas, the FAA gives you 2,000 feet of obstacle clearance. The second thing that an MEA gives us is navigational coverage for the entire route segment, meaning that you'll be able to pick up the VOR that you need to track throughout the entire segment of the route. You'll always have that navigational coverage. So if we look at our map here, some basic symbology here. First thing we're going to circle is a VOR. So this is what VORs look like. Next, just to demonstrate, our dash arrow here is the route segment. So from VOR to VOR or VOR to a waypoint. And then the last thing we're going to circle here on this map are the top numbers along each route. These are the MEAs. So these top numbers along the route segments, these are the minimum en route altitudes. The next altitude we're going to talk about is Mocha. Mocha stands for minimum obstruction clearance altitude. Now Mocha is pretty similar to an MEA, but it does have one major difference. So let's go ahead and draw our two VORs up here and get our course between them as well. Okay, so the first thing, just like an MEA, Mocha gives us obstacle clearance throughout the entire route segment. Again, meaning you're not going to hit anything. Same obstacle clearance, so 1,000 feet mountainous, not 2,000 feet non-mountainous. And a Mocha gives us navigational coverage as well, but not for the entire route segment, only for 22 nautical miles from each VOR. So there's a 22 nautical mile radius from each VOR in which you'll get navigational coverage. So if you want navigational coverage along your entire route, you'll have to fly at the MEA, which will be a higher altitude. Draw our map up, and we can point out what a Mocha looks like on the chart. So Mochas are usually below MEAs with an asterisk next to them, and they're at lower altitudes. So we can see here these two altitudes that have asterisks next to them. These are Mochas, or minimum obstruction clearance altitudes. Okay, our third altitude is the Mocha, which is the minimum off-route altitude. So it's essentially you're not flying on a Victor airway. You're flying between points, and you're not necessarily following the Victor airway. So they still have to give us minimum altitude so that we don't hit anything. So that's the thing that it gives us is obstacle clearance throughout. However, with Moroz, there's no guarantee of navigational coverage because we're not necessarily flying around along a defined route by the FAA, so there is no guaranteed navigational coverage. This is what they look like. They're bigger letters, and they cover entire grid sections. Still give you the same amount of obstacle clearance, but yeah, they cover entire grid sections, which is 1 degree by 1 degree. Let's move on to our MCAs, our minimum crossing altitudes. So a minimum crossing altitude is essentially either at intersections or waypoints along airways at which we need to cross that waypoint or that intersection at a certain altitude. And if we do so, then we're guaranteed not to run into obstacles along the other side. So we're looking at them here. This is what they look like on the chart. They're flags with little X's in them, and that will grab your attention to show you that that is a more minimum off-route altitude. We can see here at Stacko, there's some information below Stacko. It tells us what altitudes we need to cross depending on which direction we're flying. So if in this example, if we were crossing Stacko intersection on Victor 200 and we are heading southeastbound, then we'd have to cross Stacko at a minimum of 11,000 feet. That'll guarantee us from hitting any obstacles after we cross Stacko. Alright, the last altitude we're going to talk about today is the MSA, the minimum safe altitude. These altitudes are typically found on approach plates. They offer 1,000 feet of obstacle clearance, no matter where you are, whether it's mountainous or non-mountainous, just 1,000 feet of obstacle clearance. And they're provided for aircraft in emergency situations. It's for pilots to use in emergency situations. So let's go ahead and draw up our map again. Now they're typically going to be in the bottom corner of approach plates. So here we can see the minimum safe altitude for the Ogden VOR. We can see it's 25 nautical miles. So this gives us a 25 nautical mile radius around the Ogden VOR at which we will have 1,000 feet of obstacle clearance. But it's also based on these segments here. So depending on which side of the VOR we're flying on, it will tell us what altitude we need to be at to avoid all obstacles. Cool. Thanks for watching, guys. Check out more of our videos at www.flyaxiom.com.